Hello, viewers. Well, F1 2020 is almost upon us, and by the time you see this video, you may actually be playing the game. You've seen our early hands-on, you've seen a lot of the contents that are in the game and a couple of features, and we've gone into some depth as well in those features, looking at last year, this year, some of the changes, some of the different aspects that we can find in the game. Today, I'm joined by Tim Goodchild.
Hey, Alan.
And we're going to be discussing the review. Tim's going to be reviewing the game. He's our in-house F1 expert. He's going to be reviewing the game. We're going to be talking about some of the different components and sort of taking it into a bit more detail. So, Tim, thanks for coming on today. And I guess really, first thing is tell us about what's new this year. You're an F1 fan. You've been playing for years. What's new in the game this year?
There's quite a lot of new aspects to the game this year. The main one is the My Team mode, which is really, in some ways, what we've all been looking forward to. Really wanted to see in an F1 game since the days of Jeff Crammond's Grand Prix for me, it was the Atari ST, but it was on Amiga and PC back in the day as well. The opportunity to basically create your own team, fully edit it, create your own livery, choose your driver and go racing to fight in amongst the top echelons of the motorsporting world. So that's obviously the primary aspect of the new game. Obviously, in the real world, we don't have the real calendar or what we should be expecting to see in Formula One this year. So you've got tracks like Hanoi and in Vietnam and Zandvoort for the Netherlands. 2 Grand Prix, which sadly won't be happening this year, but you can play them in the game. So it's great to have a couple of extra tracks this year. There were some hidden extra features as well. For me, finally having a virtual rear view camera is great. Certainly if you haven't got a ultra-wide monitor or you don't have a steering wheel set up where you can be in the cockpit and look at your wing mirrors, having that virtual rear view camera is a great addition to have, and in many ways is almost like worth a review point in its own right. But yeah, so they are the top line features in addition to what you'd expect to see of a iteration franchised game where you've got all the current drivers and teams available in the sport.
Now, you mentioned the virtual rear view. They sort of had that in the race. As we're recording this right after the Austrian Grand Prix. There was a moment there, I think, on Charles Leclerc's car when he was driving, and they had a graphic actually on the halo of a rear view as well. That was quite interesting at one point on the race. So they're adopting these things for real life as well. It's so almost hard to tell the difference between real life and the video game with all the graphics they have on screen. So you've got lots of new features then. But how does that translate to gameplay, Tim? What are your first impressions of the game, your impressions been playing through it so far?
Well, as with any iteration or a sports franchise game, I always feel there are 2 ways of looking at these sorts of games. If you look at it in just looking at it as a standalone product, new into Formula One, say this is the first Formula One game you picked up in ever or in 10 years, you think this is an absolutely brilliant product. And it would be. It is in its own right. It is a great product, represents Formula One, features. In fact, there's also split screen mode, for example, this year as well. Great things to have as part of a racing game to represent Formula One. Unfortunately, though, it is an iteration of an annual franchise. This is the 10th multi-platform F1 game from Codemasters, and for me, it has a lots of great features, but they're not fully thought out. The more I've played it, the more I've actually become to dislike it, actually. And when you get away from the gloss of the new team mode, for example, the game is exactly the same as 2019, and 2019, the game was exactly like 2018. So for me, there are some key aspects in the overall experience of being in Formula One which just haven't been looked at, and really I would have thought to have been developed more after we're into
what kind of specifics can you give us? If there was something that you thought, it'd been better if they'd done this better, what's a couple of good examples?
Sure. So for me, when you look at Formula One on the TV, you start off a new weekend, you're in practice, you go out onto the track, you want to check your systems, make sure everything's running. And quite often you see those drivers get in the car, drive out, do an installation lap, then they come back into the garage and then they start their practice programs. That might be unique to a new upgrade, or they want to test a particular aspect of the car, see how it performs on worn tires or on long runs and so forth. Where I have a real issue with this game is, we are 2 or 3 years now into the same development cycle where you sit in on a first practice and you are literally playing the exact same practice modes that you've seen for 2, 3 years on the trot. And it is a chore. It's no longer enjoyable. Why are they not replicating real life a little bit more? Why are they've got a wonderful R&D section in the game. You would think, and you get told by your engineer, we've got some updates on the car that have been successfully fitted following development over the last couple of weeks. Why isn't there not a practice program dedicated to those parts that your team has developed, which would add a little bit of fun to the game? And I had this long hope that one day there will be 100 different practice programs in the game that vary from track to track. You don't quite know what you're going to get when you turn up at the track. And that's almost like, I'll want to complete those 3 practice sessions. The solution that they've done this year is you can skip the entire practice sessions, but you still get a reward from doing it. So is the solution just to avoid it, skip over it and move on? Maybe so. At least it means I don't have to actually do it anymore, which is almost like taking away from the impact of actually playing the game.
In a way that it could personalize the experience more, couldn't it? If you were able to bring to bear your experience and perhaps even select the testing program that you think might yield greater results for the nuances of your car or your team.
Absolutely.
It could open up a whole new world of sort of depth for you as a driver rather than a manager. And I think this is always the important thing, is that you want an in-depth driving experience in Formula One, not necessarily management experience.
And that's where I think they've taken, because you can still do the career mode, the 10-season career mode as a driver, move between teams and so forth. But with this My Team, you're introduced as you are developing a team. Oh, and you're going to drive as well, because that happens these days, doesn't it? George Russell, you don't see him managing how Williams runs, for example. So, I kind of feel like they should have completely separated the two. You've got, if you want to do the driver career and change your teams every year, great, do that. Or you want to do the team management. You are a team manager. You get to choose 2 drivers to drive for your team, and you can. I have fond memories of being a kid playing Jeff Crammond's Grand Prix, and I could choose 2, 3, 4 drivers that I could race as, and you would do like 5 or 6 laps within each driver. You'd fade out, fade back in, and you'd take over. Wouldn't it be great if you could do that and actually control both your drivers through a race? You could almost like implement your own team orders and sort of construct, and you're really sort of managing from above, but then also in between the races, actually sort of just, taking the proper management side on and doing the fun behind the scenes stuff as well. I just don't think this whole player manager, using a football term there, is just unrealistic in 2020.
It's funny, when they add new features, the problem is there's no point in being half-hearted when you add a new feature. You really need to do it properly. And sometimes that can mean it's a rather big job. The problem is when it's a big job, the development team's likely to spread it over 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
But sometimes we see half a job and it doesn't seem to improve every year. And then you end up with kind of a repetitive experience. I think in a way, that just takes me to the whole classic cars thing, which is quite similar, where we love to see the odd classic car. When they first started the classic cars in 2013, they even had some classic tracks. to go with the cars. And that felt great. It was bringing something new. We thought, wow, perhaps Codemasters are going to build on this every year. Perhaps the odd new track every year, the odd new bunch of new cars. But it seems like it's been so limited that you've ended up with a bunch of cars that aren't compatible to race each other. You can't create a season. They don't have any of the original tracks in there. It's kind of sort of it's a nice sort of tour, if you like. It's like a classic GP, isn't it?
Yep.
Modern classic GP. It's just a tour event, really, and it would be nice if we had a proper old school Formula One take on it. So there are good elements in there, but I think all round it just needs a bit more meat to the bones. In terms of last year to this year, is there anything that you feel stand out that you really enjoy, though? That this year you said, I've enjoyed that in the previous, but I enjoy it even more this year. What stands out to you this year that's sort of good?
That's good.
Good.
Sorry. Look, I mean, I know. Because I'm so passionate about Formula One,
Yeah,
and passionate about Formula One games, I really want Codemasters just to create the absolute behemoth of Formula One games that I can just lose, get the stressy day job out of the way, and I can, lose my evenings in the world of Formula One. So I might come across as critical, but I'm only coming across that way because I want to see the best product in the end. But so in terms of positivity, the racing is superb, and I can't fault that in any conceivable way. Now I'm currently set up to play predominantly on a pad, and I have to say the handling this year is brilliant on a pad, which I'm sure and I'd hope is good news to a lot of people.
yeah.
I feel like I can really throw the car around a little bit more, and the back end is not going to spin me off. I can ride curved a little bit more. That's the penultimate corner at Bahrain, for example, just before that back straight, the final back fast straight. I quite often ran the curbs going into that corner, and in 2018 and 2019 would always spin off. Now I'm finding that I can ride that curb and it's just glued to the track a little bit more. So that kind of thing is great. And when you're pushing the car on the ragged edge, you're locking up and you're seeing that effect on the wheels a little bit more, which is also great to see. And despite all of the periphery on the edge in terms of all the management and the R&D stuff that you do in between the races, and even outside of the practice sessions, which I'll always have a gripe about, the actual racing is fantastic. And one thing which I really I'm so thankful for this year is that from leaving the grid, when the lights go out, you don't feel like you're being left behind from everybody else and being swamped. You're actually seeing other drivers in front of you making a few mistakes or getting wheel spin, and you're actually gaining places on the first lap, which is something which I very rarely, if ever, did in 2019.
That's good. I mean, it's the same with the wheel, actually. There's subtle improvements been made to handling every year, gets better and better. There's still some elements that I'm still sort of working on with the wheel, which I'm going to go back and test more because there's always tweaks to be made. And that was just down to sensitivity issues, but I've had a few issues with my wheel setup as well. So, and also with some of the classic cars, I've done a bit more testing in particular on the classic Benettons that have been added, and rather interesting nuances. When you turn into a corner and you get on the power ever so slightly, that just to put power through the wheels, the car gets a bag of oversteer, and so you're constantly opposite locking, and it doesn't feel quite right. The car isn't quite there yet. There's definitely something, and I noticed that with the classic cars, I was moving around a lot, and they weren't. They were stable like rocks on the replay. So there is definitely, whether that means that the physics aren't being displayed as well in the other cars in the replay or something like that, I don't know. But there's still work to be done. But either way, we are on a transitional period in terms of this generation now. And over the course of the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing steps moving forward. One of the things I noticed this year was obviously they've downgraded. They've refined the graphics, shall we say, to enable the virtual rear view mirror, to enable split screen mode. That's worked well. As we move into the next gen now, they'll get that graphical power back again. Tim, if there was something in the next gen that you're most looking forward to being added? Is there anything that you've thought, I would love it if they were able to do this, but it's probably impossible?
Oh, crikey, you've really put me on the spot there. You know what? For me, it's just focusing on the little details. I mean, I feel like Codemasters feel, I don't know whether it's the marketing side or they're looking for the USP at each year. You know, like last year it was like, oh, we've got Formula 2. This year, oh, we've got my team. For me, I kind of hope that before we go into the new regulations of Formula One, that F1 2021, which we already know what the cars are going to look like because they're going to look like a lot what's on the track this afternoon. I would hope that Codemasters can sort of take all of the aspects that they've introduced over the last 2 or 3 games and just focus on honing them a little bit more and developing what we've currently got and creating a great product. Something to almost like see out the this generation out with, because even if this game comes out on PS5 or Xbox One X, you know, it's always going to be the start of the next generation, so to speak. So you're only really going to get a graphical improvement, I think. But yeah, but one thing which I wanted to talk about in terms of the classic cars, I agree with everything that you've said. Again, one gripe that I have is, you know, its integration into the career modes. You know, you get invited to an invitationals that never ever happen in real life, which, you know, and I think Formula One games are trying to replicate real life as best they can, and there's no such thing as an invitational. But I kind of feel like, why don't we just replicate a Goodwood Festive Speed, for example? Why can't, you know, all the F1 teams are going to a made-up event this weekend. There's going to be a hill climb. You've been destined to drive, or you've been signed up to drive 3 or 4 cars. All the other F1 drivers are going to be there. You've got to set the fastest time. You know, and I kind of feel like that is a lot more interesting, and that would immediately transfer into an online mode as well. You know, almost like a point-to-point, almost like a little bit rally-esque, you know, in an F1 car. A little bit weird, but it exists in real life, and it would also create much better interaction into the game, and for the gamer, but also integration into a career mode and the My Team as well. It's just that puts it on a different level, and not something I've ever seen in an F1 game, or in any sort of racing game really. And I think that would be such a great addition to add.
It could add. I mean, I think, like you say, I mean, something I'm looking forward to is VR. Eventually, it's VR implementation in Formula One. It's something that I feel that the cockpit experience in racing games in general is a bit too stable. It's not intense enough. The feeling inside these cars is intense, and I would love an experience that can give you that. And it's funny, but I remember Need for Speed Shift probably went a bit too far years ago, but it would be nice to find a balance that gives you a bit more sort of energy through the car. I always remember Anthony Davidson saying literally 10 years ago that there was more vibration in the game than you get in real life, because your body cushions all the vibration. You don't see the vibration when you're in the car, if you like. But either way, I think it's difficult getting that helmet and sensitivity. There's still work there in terms of getting that feeling of being in the car. But I mean, Tim, I guess to round up this year, I mean, obviously it's been an evolution for 10 years on console for Codemasters. How would you rate F1 2020 for those who are new to it and those who are, because you've also got the assisted steering and stuff like that, and for new to it and those who are coming back, how would you rate it?
I think if you're new to it, you make a good point of the assisted steering. I think that's a great addition. I mean, Formula One is a complex sport at the best of times, and to put that into a racing, and I know there are the sim racers out there that want the most, you know, difficult, hardest, but also the most realistic representation of the sport. But most gamers, or most people that pick up this game, probably don't have that sort of setup, or don't have the time that it's needed to put in to race against the best. So for Codemasters to look at that, make a product that is great for all abilities, and having split screens, so the parents can sit down with their children and be able to play a little bit of Formula One at split difficulty levels. Great, that's all fantastic. For people that have been tied into this franchise since the beginning, it is an annual iteration, and it's from the racing aspect, it is probably the best it's been. So you're not going to be disappointed by the product. There are definitely aspects of the new team mode, and you've also got the full Formula 2 season if you want it. Sadly, there's no story mode as such as we had last year, which is disappointing not to see that continue. But you do still have an option to do the full Formula 2 season as a precursor to starting your Formula 1 career. I feel like it would have been great to have had my team start in Formula 2, and you do that for a season or two before promoting to Formula 1. But hey, perhaps that's something for the future. But no, to sum up though, it is a fine product. It is great for newcomers. And if you've got 2019, is there enough to warrant a national cost? I think there is. If you're a fan of Formula 1, you're going to want to drive the latest tracks. And have the latest liveries, but the core roots of the game, it is a great racing experience and something which I will get into later in the year.
Excellent. Well, thanks for all of that, Tim. And I look forward to seeing your full review. Tim's full review will be on the Team VV website, so you can read that there, and that will go into a lot more detail on various elements discussed here. We'll have a quick chat a very brief chat about Austrian Grand Prix this weekend. It was an interesting race. I think the qualifying on Saturday, or even all the practice sessions, indicated that Mercedes are a long way ahead of the rest of the field. I think the race started quite brightly with obviously Max Verstappen getting up there, and Lewis obviously had his penalty for going through the yellow flag, yellow light during qualifying. And it looked like Max was definitely going to be fighting for the win at the end. But then there was a bit of mayhem, plenty of safety cars. Actually, there were, I think, 3 or 4 safety cars in the Formula 2 in the morning. And I noticed that they were not only slow at getting rid of some of the cars, but also bringing out the safety car, I felt, in some cases, where it could have been double wave yellows when the safety car was parked right next to the the stewards areas. But either way, we're very safe in Formula 1. I've got no problem with that, by the way. So safety cars it is, and it certainly changed the race up today. Tim, what are your thoughts on the race first?
Well, interesting, as you were saying that, I'm just wondering whether there are new COVID-19 rules with removing cars from the track. Is it better just to put a full course yellow on, so to speak, and ensure that if they just bring a crane on and bring it off as opposed to marshals coming off track. Anyway, two things for me. One is it felt like back to school for just generally. I think there's a few rusty drivers there that probably aren't quite in the zone yet, and I don't really care about the who won the race. I don't really care about Lewis's altercation with Albon again. All I care about is seeing Lando Norris on the podium.
Yeah. Oh, tremendous result. I mean, to do the fastest lap of the race on the final lap, to absolutely nail it.
He knew that time that he needed to get, didn't he? And it was just wonderful to see, and I think that's how next generation coming through. I think it was just sad that Russell went out, because I reckon he would have finished 10th.
I think he would have. I think Russell, wow. I mean, honestly, what he manages to get out of that car never ceases to amaze me. People do not realise how he is driving the wheels off that car. Tremendous speed he's got. And I look forward to the day when he's actually in a proper, decent car that can get somewhere, because I think he's going to be an absolute machine. If I was Mercedes, I'd be all over him right now. I'd be saying, we need him.
He has to be in the car, doesn't he? I'd love to see him partner Lewis. I really would. Yeah,
I think that would be something. I think in general, I think there was we had a mistake from Sebastian early on, Sebastian Vettel, and I think that it was again another awful error really from him. You know, I don't know where his head was. A little bit desperate. Um, he's definitely not comfortable there. You know, I know his drive is ending at the end of the season, but these guys are paid a lot of money to be professional. You get in the car, you do your job. Everything else is irrelevant. And if he's not able to clear his head effectively, which he's proven he hasn't on multiple occasions, then he's not really in the right place for racing, full stop. And he just, I think these last few years, it's a lot of spins from him. He really needs to get his head together. I think Charles Leclerc did have his head together today. And my goodness me, worked his way up through the field, took his time, cracking second place for him.
Yeah.
I mean, where did he start? 11th, something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously other things happened, but you know, that was a really considered drive from him. That was a championship drive.
First, you have to finish.
Exactly. You just got to get through measured overtakes, stuff like that. I think he did that really well. I think Force India, from my eyes, that was a unsafe release. I don't know why they didn't get an unsafe release penalty. There's a marker on the wall that the McLaren was clearly passed. So this isn't an opinion. It's simply, was it past the marker or not? It clearly was. Otherwise, that wouldn't have happened. So weird how they didn't enforce that. I think we had a bit of bumper cars, obviously, with Perez, and I think it was Lando getting past. That's fine. I mean, Perez was always very racy. And it was definitely competitive between them and McLaren this weekend, and things got quite racy between Lando and Carlos as well.
Yeah,
I think there is some fragility in the Mercedes engine, clearly, with the curbs and the issues they were having. As for Lewis and Albon, I feel sorry for Albon again. I think Albon did the right thing. I think Lewis went in there a little bit too hot, and it made a bit of contact, and it's one of those things. But Albon must be gutted. You know, what does it take for him to get on the podium? I think Albon may have won the race today if he'd got past. He was on the soft tyre. I think he would have outbraked. He could have pushed hard. He would have outbraked Valtteri and won the race. That was my feeling towards the end there. I don't think
there seems to be a weird coincidence that every single time that Hamilton and Albon come together, McLaren score a podium.
Yes, and there's a stat right there. But you know, I was just happy to see. I thought, you know, he's 5.1 seconds behind. I thought, come on, Lando,
exactly.
Nail it, and he absolutely did on that final lap there. I mean, to get the fastest lap of the race point, and of course the podium points as well. You know, I can imagine McLaren are over the moon. And the difference between this race to Brazil in particular is the raw pace. You know, he started from third. He finished in third.
Yes.
It wasn't sort of handed to them. You know, it wasn't like he was always there or thereabouts. His laps he had a couple of periods where you could see early on where he mentioned in qualifying yesterday that the car didn't handle well when it was heavy on fuel, but the lighter it got, the better it got.
Although it does,
at the end,
I mean, look,
the only,
yeah, absolutely. And the last sort of comment from me was that it just. And I know, Alan, we've talked about this many a time. You know, these cars, though, they are built now just to cruise, and that's just so disappointing to see. You know, how out of nowhere, you know, when Lewis was told you're going to make 5-second gap all of a sudden if you want to stay on the podium, he was able to pump in 107s, and then McLaren, no disrespect to McLaren, but all of a sudden it can put in like the fastest lap right at the end. It's like the pace is there, you know, but they're basically told you gotta. And I'm all for. I say I'm all for it, but I do long for the days where these cars were built for 200 miles and now they're built for 2,000 miles. And I would love to go back to a day where they are mean machines built for 200-mile races, and that is it.
The problem is the technology has taken over,
Yeah.
right? So if you said to the drivers, right, you get no tire data, you get nothing, right? The only data is what you feel from the car, okay? Then that driver might be thinking, oh, I don't know, should I push or should I cruise? Drivers will just push because they, you know, and those that cruise will understand their tires better. It brings experience. You know, but now, because you've got so many sensors on the car, you can chuck a teenager in there. He's just as good as someone who's been driving for 20, 30 years longer, because the data's telling you. If you took all that off the car and it was just down to feel, so you were braking to a corner and feeling this is happening or that's happening with the car, then you'd have something to work with. I suppose in a way people say to me I'm old-fashioned when I say things like that, and I say, well, the problem is, for me, it was always meant to be man and machine. It was a machine and a man driving that machine, a bit like horse racing. You know, you could say, well, we don't travel on a horse to work every day now, do we? We have cars, and that's right. But Formula One for me should be a set sport, and I think that that's different from the technology-driven area where we're at now, where there are driver aids that are effectively telling the drivers what the car is doing and everything else, rather than the driver using the force and actually doing it themselves. So I think we're in a different. It's not only that; it's the fact there's like 100 people back at base driving the car as well. It's not just the driver. There's so many people that are live doing things and telling the driver to do things and doing things themselves. And I think that's where Formula One is, like you say, Lando was suddenly able to just floor it. And you realize guys just been cruising, all the cars are just cruising. They're like, oh, no, tire temperatures and engine temperatures and this happening and that happening. So no one's really pushing the cars to the limit. And that's Formula One should be guys absolutely going for it.
Well, what a perfect segue to say, if you think you can do better, pick up F1 2020.
Absolutely. And on that note, Tim, you're absolutely right. So that's it from us for now. I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of chat about F1 2020. I'm going to get on, play a bit more, and you'll see a couple of the classic cars racing, a couple of other races on the channel as well. Do let us know what you'd like to see. Do check out Tim's review on the website. Like and subscribe. It supports everything we do, and there'll be lots of other content coming to the channel as well. But that's it from us for now. As ever, more soon. Hello, beautiful. Thanks for watching the video today. Hope you enjoyed it. Do like and subscribe. Supports what we do. And also check in the description if you want to become a YouTube member or Patreon. Support us in every way possible to get out there and get some awesome content. But that's it. Hope you've enjoyed it. Check out these videos. Check out the site. And there'll be more from me very soon.